Okay, does anyone have questions about the actual prep time process itself? Very good, very good, very good. Okay, let's talk now about how to cut down time. Obviously, a lot of you guys, if you do your first Extemp prep session, you're going to find that two things are going to happen. One, either you're going to be a prodigy and it's going to be really easy for you, or two, you're going to realize that it's not really as much time as you thought it was. And it's really hard to prep. Even if you try to budget out your time, it can be really hard to prep an Extemp speech, a good Extemp speech, in half an hour. So as you start to think through that, as you start to practice, here are some tips for how you can cut down on the amount of prep time. The first thing is the most important thing: you need to practice. If you do not practice, you will fail. I am going to say that explicitly now. You cannot expect to see that market improvement or even success if you don't practice, again, unless you're just a prodigy. The best way to cut down on time and make prep more efficient is just to practice. There were some other tips that I employed, but I started to see my prep time drop most the more experienced I got with just prepping different questions, prepping different types of questions, doing it over and over and over again. Practice prepping with a steadily decreasing time limit. Challenge yourself. This was one thing that I like to do, where I'd set aside an afternoon to practice Extemp prep. I know that's not like the most fun thing, like, oh, I could go to the movies, or I could spend my afternoon practicing Extemp prep. But it is worth it, but practice it with a decreasing time limit. So take, say, a list of 10 questions. Prep your first question using the full 30 minutes. Then prep your second question using 25 minutes. Your third question using 20, your fourth question using 15, your fifth question using 10, and your sixth question using 5. That will make sure that your mental process is very, 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 very fast. The more you challenge yourself, the more you push yourself, the longer half an hour is going to seem. If you are used to prepping in 10 minutes and you get into an Extemp prep room and you have 30 minutes, that's going to seem like an eternity to you. You're going to get to the point where you're like, can this prep time be over already? Like, can this just be done, please? The only way you can do that, though, is by challenging yourself, by practicing, especially with gradually decreasing time limits. Also, just a quick note on that, as you get more experienced, make sure that your starting time is lower. When I was practicing for Night Talk, my starting time was 15 minutes. And then I go down to 13, and then 11, and then 9, and then 7, and then 5, and then 3. So make sure that the more experienced, the faster you get, that even your starting time starts to be a little bit more of a challenge for you as well. Make sure you don't rush it, but make sure, that's actually the next point. Never rush, always make sure that you are prepping a cohesive body of thought. Has anyone ever played instruments? Okay, has anyone ever had a section in a song where they were playing where there was like a really fast section? There were a lot of notes, it was really quick. One thing that I always struggled with is I always wanted to just jump right in and do it really fast. I always wanted to sit down at my piano, walk up to this Rachmaninoff concerto and just start playing the really fast part because it sounded cool. What I realized, however, is if you start by rushing through a section, it is going to make it really sloppy and you're not going to do very well. You have to start by doing it painstakingly slow and then moving to be a little more fast. So I would recommend for those of you who are just starting off with Extemp, start at 30 minutes, go down to 25, go down to 20, but don't go any lower than 15. Making sure that you're still giving yourself plenty of time to think through each of these steps and work through it. For those of you who have competed in Extemp for maybe a year or two, start off with 30 again, but go a little lower. Maybe go to 10. For those of you who have a lot of experience, who break a lot in Extemp, maybe start cutting that down to 5 minutes. But make sure you don't rush. Make sure you practice the slow section. Make sure you get the dynamics down. Make sure you get the rhythm down. Make sure you're not rushing. Make sure your teacher doesn't call you a wobbly panda as you're playing through a section. My teacher had character, okay?
Wobbly panda, that's it.
Yeah. She also threatened to hit me with a 2x4 if I kept doing it. She brought a 2x4 to my piano lesson once. Anyway, never rush. Don't get beat up by my piano teacher, okay? Make sure you spend enough time working through something so you're actually good at it, not just fast at it. That is one of the most pivotal differences. Did you have a question? You raised your hand.
Oh no, it got answered.
Okay, cool. All right. Second thing you want to do to cut down on time is you always want to think ahead. You want to think several steps ahead of the process you are currently at. Just because there are steps, just because I gave you guys 6 steps, doesn't mean that you're only doing one thing at a time. It doesn't mean that while you're doing step 1, the only thing you're thinking about is step 1. You also want to be thinking about step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6. You want to be doing those as quickly as possible. The more you can think about, the more your brain can process, the more you can think ahead, the more effective you're going to be. It's kind of a similar concept. If any of you guys have ever played chess, you're good at chess if you can think certain amounts of moves ahead. The people that are best at chess, like grandmasters, can play whole games in their head. They can play out numerous predictions for how the game might go given a certain number of variables, and they can play out 30, 40 moves in their head. The way to be most effective, just like a grandmaster in speech, is to think ahead. When you're on step 1, when you're choosing your question, think about, hey, what sorts of evidence could I look for with this question? Think about what sorts of arguments could I run with this question? What would my outline be? What sorts of transitions could I have? Think through all of those things. Make sure your primary focus is on the step that you're on. Don't go on rabbit trails. But definitely start to think steps ahead. While you're doing things like researching, you'd be thinking ahead to other steps. You should be thinking about how that research is going to fit into points. Yeah?
Can you have all the questions, and if you don't find a lot of stuff on one of them, can you switch to another midway through?
Yes, actually, if you'll notice my card, I didn't switch questions. But you'll notice there's a bunch of black squiggly lines. I completely redid my outline, and I was like, I don't really like that. I written my first point, I think, and then I changed it, and then I changed it again. So you can definitely, nothing is solid, nothing is concrete, nothing is set in stone until you say it in your speech. So you can change stuff, you can change your outline, you can change the question. Make sure you have enough time if you do change your question that you're not committing suicide. Hey, I'm going to change my question with 2 minutes left in prep time. That's a great idea. Because it's not going to be better, but you definitely can. Yeah.
Have you ever had it where your card is so messy and unorganized that you just write it all down on a different card?
No. I would not be able to make it through prep time with a messy card. If my card is not clean, I would fix it before I would move on. Because that's just, I get stressed if it's not.
So do you use a notepad and then take that information to make your card? Or you can do it all at the same time?
I do it all at the same time. Sometimes if I want to restart a point, I'll use a different card. So if it's I get through my first point and I'm like, actually this isn't working as well as I thought it would, so I'm just going to switch to a different card. I can just copy the intro down and move on. But that's one of the really important things about making sure you have time down so you give yourself the ability to be able to do that. Yeah. If it takes you 25 minutes on average to prep a speech, you're not going to have the ability to change questions or the ability to change your outline. If it takes you 10 minutes and that's slow to prep a speech, then you could go through 2, 3, 4 speech outlines before you get to the one that you really want to do. Yeah.
I think what Benjamin was saying, you just don't want to confuse yourself. You're focused on this one argument, then you switch right away.
Yeah.
That's what happened to Grace and I. I got confused because we were writing 2 topicality presses, and I got confused about one.
That's the worst. Yeah, you definitely want to make sure that you know where you are, that you know what you're thinking through, you know what you're talking about. So I definitely say, when you're starting to think ahead, think 1 step ahead. Say, okay, I'm coming up with my question. What sort of outline could I have for this question? Don't think that much further than that. But if you are an elite or an experienced competitor, challenge yourself to think through the whole process at once. I did that where I would practice. Once I prepped an Extemp speech in 45 seconds because I just decided I wanted to challenge myself. This was at the peak of my preparedness between Point Loma and ICC. And so I just prepped the speech because I thought through everything the instant I saw the question. It was just a natural subconscious reaction in my mind. So definitely challenge yourself to think ahead. But don't think too far ahead. The more you think ahead, the quicker your thought process will be, and the quicker your thought process will be, the less time you will spend actually prepping in a round, and the better your speech is going to be. So cut down your thought process, increase your ability to think ahead, and make sure that you more effectively use your time. Okay, 3, put in the work. That could be a motivational speech, right? Put in the work. Make sure that you're putting the work into not just practicing your prep, not just practicing your speeches, but understanding current events. The most added time, in my opinion, comes from trying to understand something that you did not know. Comes from trying to understand something that did not make sense to you going into prep time. Like the speech where I almost had to give a speech about mutual funds, I didn't really know what mutual funds were. So I spent like the first 10 minutes of my prep time hastily reading articles trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Back in the days before Extemp Genie, I got a question, and the question was about some world leader that I didn't know. And so I was like furiously typing out different countries trying to find who their president was or something like, it's gotta be somewhere, it's gotta be somewhere. You waste a lot of time if you don't have a basis of knowledge going into prep. If you have that basis of knowledge, if you understand a lot about things, then you're going to be able to speed up your prep time. The longest prep times I had, was probably Point Loma this last year. It was a question about Argentina. I had no idea what the heck was going on. So I probably spent like 17, 18 minutes, probably 7 or 8 minutes of that was just me trying to figure out what the heck was going on in Argentina because I had no idea. So the most time you spend is going to come from just trying to understand something that you might not have understood before. You can cut out a lot of this by researching common issues right before the tournament. One of the things I like to do is I like to go on Google News and I just like to say, like search news or something, or search Middle East, or search Europe, or search economics, and see what the top news stories are. I guarantee you that there are going to be questions on the top news stories of that last week. So if you just do some research right before a tournament, just to understand what common current issues are, that's going to be really effective. If you already understand something, prep's going to be easy. This also applies to just understanding governments, world leaders. Understand who prominent world leaders are. Understand who like the presidents of important countries are. Understand who is leading Turkey right now. Understand how to pronounce his name. Also, that would be important. Just make sure that you understand stuff, that you have a basis of knowledge that you don't have to do when you're in prep time, that you can have outside of prep time. Yes?
In the previous club we were part of, they actually had briefs to give some historical background to current issues. Do you think that could be a helpful thing to have a box of briefs that...
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely could. We haven't done that because we're lazy. But that does sound like a really good idea. I would definitely encourage you guys who are in Extemp to push for that this year. Yeah.
I will just bring in a CIA World Factbook.
Yes, CIA World Factbook's amazing.
What?
The CIA World Factbook has information on like every country on the face of the planet.
Sierra?
No,
CIA.
CIA.
Oh, CIA.
I heard
Sierra.
And they have like the biggest exports, imports for certain countries. They have like all the economic and political information you could want to know about every country in the world. So it's really important if you get a question about Zimbabwe, you have no idea anything about Zimbabwe, like I don't, then you could look up, you know, what is Zimbabwe.
Oh, you can take that in the prep room. I guess
Yes.
it's not internet.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. Are you allowed to bring in print sources into the prep room? Not
Yes.
into the room, obviously, but into the prep room.
Yes.
Okay. Any limits on that kind of thing?
Nope.
Okay. Cool.
You can bring in a stack of
Wait,
magazines and your Bible.
Night Talk, was it true that some people were, because we were in the library, so was it true some people were going out and...
They couldn't leave the area we were in. I don't think there were any books in the area we were in, so I don't think
You
anyone
grab a book off the shelf. It's a prep
Oh,
too.
about something like the CIA World Factbook, if you're quoting that in a speech, would you not be putting down the date? Would you not treat it as a news article? Would you treat it more as general information, or would you even quote it?
You wouldn't even quote it.
Okay.
You just say, look, this is true about Zimbabwe.
Is that how so you can do
Yeah.
that?
Then you seem smarter for the first thing. For the second
Sorry.
thing, it's not a news source, so you don't have to cite it.
Oh, so you only have to cite news sources.
You really only can next time. Okay, fourth. This is going to be a meta concept. Prepare for prep. Ooh. Whoa, yes.
My question is, why did you underline prepare and not prep?
Because it's confusing.
Prep is the
That was the
under-
goal.
But prep is supposed to be underlined because it's supposed to be in the book.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah,
Okay, basically you're preparing for prep. You're preparing before you even go into the prep room to make sure that you are efficient and effective when you're in the prep room. Know the location of the prep room and your competition room before the round. Know where your room is so you don't have to spend time walking up to postings like, oh, I have 2 minutes left, I have to walk over there and check my postings and not work on my extemp speech. Also, generally knowing where the prep room is a good idea. If you don't know where the prep room is, it's not going to work out very well for you. Set up your computer and your card before the round. If it takes you 2 minutes to set up your computer, do that 2 minutes before the round starts, before the first speaker, the first draw goes into prepare. So that's 2 minutes of time you get back in your prep time because you prepped before. Again, just finding ways to find small areas of expediting your prep time is the best way to cut down. Finally, this is just a public service announcement. Make sure you plug in your computer. Funny story about